Welcome back, dear listener. If stories of family, resilience, and the quiet strength of those who refuse to be erased speak to you, I invite you to stay close. Subscribe, join our circle, and share where you are listening from, because tonight's story is not just mine, it could be yours. She called me crazy, I recorded everything. That is the title of what you're about to hear. It sounds dramatic, maybe even unthinkable, but for me it began in the stillness of an ordinary night. The house was silent at 2:47 a.m. The kind of silence that presses against the walls, broken only by the sigh of old wood settling into its bones. I should have been asleep, but sleep has a way of fleeing when unease lingers in your heart. Downstairs, I heard the faintest murmur, a voice. Male, low, careful, like someone whispering secrets meant never to be overheard. My son-in-law. I pressed my hand against the banister and leaned closer, every nerve in me trembling. "She's exactly where we need her," he said, confused enough that no one will question the papers, but still capable of signing. "In a few days she'll be gone, then the rest is ours." The words cut colder than January air. For a moment, I wasn't sure if my mind was betraying me or if I was truly hearing the blueprint of my own erasure. Earlier that week, I had hidden a small microphone inside a porcelain vase in the living room. It was meant to soothe my suspicions, to reassure me that my imagination was running wild. Instead, its tiny red light blinked in the dark like an unblinking eye, recording every syllable of his conspiracy. Later, when I replayed the file, I would see the jagged lines of the sound wave dancing across my phone screen, the visual proof that I had not dreamed it, each peak and valley etched like a lie unraveling. In that moment, I understood two things with terrifying clarity. The man my daughter trusted had already decided I was disposable. My survival would depend not on pleading innocence, but on gathering truth, word by damning word. And so the night that began as another sleepless vigil became the prologue to a battle I never wanted but could not avoid. The mic in the vase was more than technology. It was a lifeline, a witness, the first thread of a net I would spend the coming days weaving, not for comfort, but for survival. This was the night my story truly began. Morning came, though it felt less like sunrise and more like a curtain being pulled back on a play I had never agreed to perform in. The kitchen smelled of coffee and buttered toast, the ordinary notes of domestic life. Yet beneath that veneer, something had shifted. I could feel it in the way Brandon, my son-in-law, watched me, eyes sharp as pins while his voice dripped with practiced concern. "Sarah," he said to my daughter, "your mom nearly left the stove on again last night. It could have burned the whole house down." I froze, my hand tightening on the mug I held. I hadn't even touched the stove. I wanted to speak to defend myself, but the words caught in my throat. Sarah's face faltered, worry clouding her tired eyes. She worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital, came home with lines etched into her cheeks from the mask, and collapsed into the arms of the man she thought she could trust. He offered her certainty, and in her exhaustion, she accepted it. Brandon leaned forward, his tone hushed as though delivering a painful truth. "I think she's slipping faster than we realized." I saw it, the flicker in Sarah's expression. The seed of doubt planted, watered by her husband's solemn nods and sighs. And me, sitting right there at the table, became invisible, furniture, a burden wrapped in skin. That night it was the front door. Brandon claimed he found it unlocked, wide open, the kind of mistake that would terrify a young woman leaving her children alone in the house. Sarah turned to me with pity that cut sharper than accusation. I wanted to shout that I had locked the door, checked it twice, but Brandon's words slipped easily into her ears while mine stumbled, sounding defensive, uncertain. Day by day, he built a case out of shadows. A cup misplaced became memory loss. A late-night walk in the garden became wandering. Silence at the dinner table became confusion. Each report was delivered with the air of a weary martyr, the good son-in-law burdened with the care of a fading old woman. And Sarah, God bless her, was too tired to question. But I questioned. Oh, I questioned everything. Each detail, each story, each subtle look exchanged between them. I wrote things down. I circled dates on a calendar. I checked the locks 3 times, then photographed them with the timestamp glowing on my phone. I would not let my life be rewritten into his narrative. One evening, as Sarah rinsed dishes and Brandon stood behind her with hands kneading her shoulders, I caught his reflection in the window pane. His face was smooth, sympathetic for her, but in the glass I saw the flicker of triumph, the glint of a man rehearsing victory. It was then I understood. He wasn't describing incidents. He was staging them. Like a director feeding lines to actors, he was scripting me into decline. And my daughter, my only child, was slowly learning her role in his theater of lies. The first cracks had appeared, not in my memory, but in the fragile fabric of trust that held our family together. And though I smiled politely, nodding at his gentle cautions, inside I began to tighten my grip on the truth. Because truth was all I had left. It began to feel like every evening followed a cruelly scripted routine. The front door would creak open, Sarah would step inside, her shoulders slumped, eyes ringed with exhaustion from 12 hours of tending to the sick, and before she could set down her bag, Brandon would meet her at the threshold with a report. Your mother left the faucet running again, flooded half the counter. Imagine if it had overflowed while no one was home. Or, I caught her in the backyard last night, barefoot in her nightgown, completely disoriented. I had to guide her back inside. His voice always carried the same weighty tone, like a physician delivering bad news, and he always made sure I was close enough to hear, as if humiliation were part of the treatment plan. Sarah would glance at me then, searching my face. What she found was not enough, because her husband's words were already filling the space where her trust once lived. I learned quickly that my denials fell flat. When I insisted I hadn't touched the faucet, Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. When I said I had simply stepped outside to breathe the night air, she shook her head with tired pity. Each protest only sounded like further evidence of decline, so I stopped defending myself. I let the accusations hang in the air, collected like cobwebs in the corners of our home. And quietly, I began to watch him. Brandon documented everything. A notebook tucked into his jacket pocket, pages filling with incidents like a detective compiling a case file. He'd jot down the time, the place, the imagined mistake, and then slip the pen away with the satisfied air of a man moving one step closer to his goal. What goal? By then I could guess. Control of me, of Sarah, of the house my late husband and I had worked for brick by brick. One evening, I overheard Sarah whisper, "Maybe we should start looking at memory care facilities, just in case." My heart clenched, not because of the words themselves. I had seen enough of the world to know how illness can steal a mind, but because she believed his version of me more than she believed my presence, my laughter, my memory of her first steps, her wedding day, her tears. That night, alone in my room, I opened a journal. On its first page, I wrote in careful letters, "He is building a lie. I must build the truth." I listed the dates, the supposed incidents, the real facts of what had happened instead. I photographed every corner I touched, every stove I turned off, every door I locked. I gathered receipts for groceries, bank slips, newspaper clippings, small proofs of clarity in a world designed to paint me foggy. But still, the house grew heavier with suspicion. My daughter's laughter was quieter, Brandon's sympathy thicker, sweeter like honey coating poison. And in the reflection of the dark kitchen window, I sometimes caught his eyes watching me, sharp, measuring, patient. It was then I understood this was no passing game. This was a campaign, a systematic effort to erase me one false incident at a time. I tightened my grip on the pen, my notes, my hidden recordings. If he was writing his story, then I would write mine. One day the two would collide, and only one of them could survive. The walls of the house seemed to breathe with me, holding in the secrets I could not yet speak aloud. Each hallway creak, each sigh of the furnace carried the weight of my silence. For weeks, I had lived in the shadow of Brandon's campaign, letting his accusations land like stones, one after another, until the pile threatened to bury me. But on a Wednesday morning, as sunlight struggled through thin curtains, something inside me shifted. I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing a single coffee cup when my reflection in the glass caught me off guard. My eyes, they weren't the eyes of a woman slipping into confusion. They were steady, sharp, alive, and it struck me, if I could see the truth in my own gaze, perhaps I could show it to the world. Frank, my late husband, used to say that predators succeed only when their prey forgets it has teeth. That memory returned to me now, not as comfort, but as a summons. That evening, Brandon staged another of his incidents. He held up my purse, contents spilled dramatically across the table. She left this out on the porch again, he said to Sarah, shaking his head. Anyone could have stolen it. Sarah's face crumpled with exhaustion, torn between work stress and worry. Mom, how could you? She whispered. I looked down at the purse. It was true it had been outside, but I remembered exactly why. I had carried groceries in, set the bag down to unlock the door, and then retrieved it minutes later. The only way it had ended up back outside was if someone had placed it there. Someone eager for proof. I forced a thin smile, nodding as if ashamed, but inside I began to plan. That night, when the house was quiet, I returned to the porcelain vase in the living room. I checked the tiny microphone hidden within, its light still blinking faithfully. I transferred the files to a small flash drive, labeling each with date and time. My hands shook not from fear but from the clarity of purpose. The next step came naturally. I began to carry my phone everywhere, snapping photos with timestamps. The stove switched off, the lock secured, my purse neatly stored in the closet. Evidence of the ordinary. Proof of sanity in a world intent on stripping it away. I knew this wouldn't be enough. Brandon was clever, systematic. He had allies I couldn't yet see. His calm assurance when he spoke to Sarah suggested he had more than suspicion on his side. Perhaps even professionals willing to vouch for my supposed decline. So I widened my circle. In the attic, I found an old leather-bound album of Frank's police years. Among the faces, stern in their uniforms, one name surfaced in my mind: Ray Collins, Frank's partner. Retired now, I'd heard, but still alive, still sharp. I had no way of knowing if he would answer my call, but the thought of reaching out planted a small seed of hope. For now, I had to stay patient. Brandon was watching, always watching. Days turned into small battles of endurance. He accused me of forgetting to feed the cat. I produced the empty tin, rinsed clean, the time-stamped receipt from the pet store still folded in my pocket. He frowned, irritated, but smoothed it over quickly when Sarah looked his way. He claimed I had left the bath running. I calmly pointed out the dry floor, the folded towel, the untouched soap bar. Again, he masked his frustration, turning it into a joke. Each time I countered, I saw a flicker in his expression, a crack in his certainty. Perhaps I was not as compliant as he had imagined. But still, Sarah's trust tilted toward him. She wanted to believe her husband. She needed to. And so, even as I quietly fought back, she remained my greatest loss and my greatest hope. One night, I overheard her whisper through tears, "I just don't know how much longer we can manage her, Brandon." The words pierced me deeper than any lie. To hear my daughter, the child I had cradled through fevers and heartbreak, speak of me as a burden, it was a wound I would carry forever. But wounds can harden into armor. I retreated to my room and wrote again in my journal, "He believes I am weak because I stay silent. He doesn't know silence is where I gather strength." My chance came sooner than I expected. Brandon left his phone charging in the kitchen, a careless move for a man so meticulous. I watched from the hallway until I heard the shower upstairs, the water roaring. My heart thudded in my chest as I crossed the floor. His passcode came easily. I had watched him enter it countless times, a birthday etched into digits. The screen lit up, and there it was, a string of messages to a name saved only as Dr. P. Package delivered. She should be disoriented within 72 hours. Commitment papers filed under emergency provisions. My blood chilled. This was bigger than I had feared. He wasn't just manipulating Sarah, he had help from a doctor. Perhaps even a facility ready to accept me, to lock me away on the strength of his lies. I photographed everything. My hands were steady, almost too steady, as though the years had prepared me for this moment. Each image stored was another brick in the wall I would build against him. By the time the water shut off upstairs, I was back in my chair, knitting in my lap as though nothing had moved at all. But inside me, everything had moved. I was no longer waiting. I was preparing. Brandon thought he was writing the final chapter of my life, but in truth, he had just given me the first line of his downfall. The following days unfolded with the slow inevitability of storm clouds gathering at the horizon. You see them long before the rain comes, but still you are helpless to stop their march across the sky. I had Brandon's phone images saved, the words that confirmed what I already knew. This was no misunderstanding, no unfortunate exaggeration. It was a plot carefully engineered with the cooperation of a man sworn to heal. A doctor, a man in a white coat who would wield his credentials like a weapon against me. I tried to keep my hands steady as I buttered toast the next morning, but inside me a tempest raged. Sarah breezed through the kitchen, scrubs wrinkled, eyes heavy, but still managing a smile for her husband. She barely looked at me except to say, "Mom, don't forget to take your pills today. Brandon told me you skipped yesterday." The lie slid into the air so effortlessly. I almost admired it. Almost. Brandon kissed her forehead and murmured, "She forgets more often than she realizes. It's getting dangerous." Dangerous, the word clung to me like smoke. Not only forgetful, not only confused, now I was to be feared. A threat. How easily he moved the goalposts from concern to danger. Sarah nodded, sighing. "I'll call Dr. Peterson later, see if he can adjust her dosage. Maybe it will help." There it was, the name. The man behind the messages. My stomach turned. Sarah didn't know. She trusted the doctor because Brandon told her to. In her eyes, this was care. In truth, it was collusion. That night, I returned to my room and pressed play on the recorder hidden in the vase. I had almost forgotten it was running. The tinny playback revealed Brandon's voice once more, low and assured. "Peterson, it's working. The meds are making her slow, exactly as you said. She wanders, she forgets. Sarah believes every bit of it. We're ready to push for commitment." A pause, then faint words from the other side, harder to catch, but enough. "File the papers this week. The court won't question it if the family agrees. I'll testify." My throat tightened. A man with authority to declare me incompetent was offering his voice, his oath, to my destruction. The next morning, Sarah cornered me in the kitchen. "Mom, I think maybe we should schedule a formal evaluation, just to be safe." Her eyes were soft, pleading, the way a child looks at you when she wants you to take your medicine, when she wants to believe she's helping. For a heartbeat, I almost caved, almost nodded, almost let myself drown in her worry. But then I remembered the words on Brandon's phone, commitment papers filed. I straightened my shoulders. "Sarah," I said gently, "you know I've always trusted you. I need you to trust me now. I'm not declining. I'm not confused." Her face flickered, guilt shadowing her features. But then Brandon entered, placing a hand on her back, his voice soothing. "Sweetheart, she doesn't realize it. That's part of the condition. It's not her fault." I could see it, the tension drain from her shoulders as she leaned into his certainty. He was her anchor in a storm, and I was cast adrift. Still, I held my silence. I needed more than words. I needed undeniable proof, so I began to shadow him. I noted his routines, the way he lingered on the phone late at night, the way he disappeared mid-morning for errands. I followed with my eyes, and sometimes with my feet. Once I saw him parked outside a small medical office on Maple Street. The sign read Dr. David Peterson, Psychiatry. I watched him emerge an hour later, tucking a folder into his jacket. When he noticed me across the street, I turned away quickly, heart hammering, pretending to study the florist's window. But I knew he had seen me because that evening his tone sharpened. "Sarah, I'm getting worried about leaving Mom alone. She's restless. I caught her wandering into the street earlier." I hadn't left the house at all, but the more outrageous his claims, the more Sarah seemed to believe him, as though exaggeration equaled urgency. And why wouldn't she? He was building a file, a fortress of paper and words, and every lie he told sounded official when wrapped in the language of care. That night, I wrote in my journal, "The enemy is not just in this house. He wears a stethoscope. He signs papers. He has the power to erase me with ink and testimony." But I also wrote, "Ink can be countered with ink. Voices can be answered with voices. The truth is not fragile if I am willing to hold it tight." I tucked the flash drive of recordings beneath the floorboard of my closet, a secret vault, my insurance. It was only then, lying in bed, that I realized the cruelest part of their scheme. It wasn't just the lies. It wasn't even the conspiracy with the doctor. It was the way Brandon had weaponized my daughter's love against me. Every time she looked at me with pity, every time she doubted me, it was another strand in his web binding me tighter. But he had made a mistake. He thought I was trapped. He thought the walls of this house were closing in, that I would collapse beneath the weight of his campaign. But walls can be watched, walls can have ears, and the ears in my house had already begun recording the truth. The storm was still gathering, yes, but I had begun gathering two proof allies' courage. The web was tightening, but so was my resolve. The morning light fell pale across the kitchen table, catching on the rim of my coffee cup. Sarah had already gone to the hospital for her shift. Brandon sat across from me, his tie knotted neatly, his phone never far from his hand. He scrolled, smiling faintly at whatever messages flickered across the screen. To him, I was a prop, a failing, fragile presence meant only to complete the illusion of his care. He spoke to me as one might speak to a child. "Remember to stay inside today, Margaret. Don't tire yourself out. I'll be back by lunch." I nodded, feigning the vagueness he expected. But when the front door closed behind him, my face sharpened into focus. The act was over. The time for silence was done. My first stop was the bank. I had rehearsed the trip in my head for days. Every step, every word, every precaution. Brandon thought he had already placed me in a cage of confusion, but he had underestimated the lessons Frank left behind. My husband had always insisted on keeping backup accounts, small lifelines tucked away for emergencies. At the time, I thought it paranoia. Now I understood it was foresight. At the counter, I signed my name with a steady hand. I moved portions of my savings into accounts Brandon knew nothing about. I changed passcodes. I set up automatic payments so the house would not fall into default if I was locked away. The teller smiled at me kindly, unaware that each keystroke was a battle one. By the time I left, the September wind felt less sharp. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight shift off my chest, if only slightly. My second stop was more dangerous. A coffee shop on the edge of town. I chose it carefully. One Brandon would never think to connect to me. He was there before me, sitting tall in the corner with his back to the wall. Ray Collins, my husband's old partner. Time had silvered his hair and added lines to his face, but his eyes, alert, piercing, were the same. "Maggie," he said, standing to greet me, "you look like hell." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "That's because someone's been trying to make me look worse." We sat, and I laid it all out. The accusations, the staged incidents, the recordings hidden in the porcelain vase, the messages on Brandon's phone. Ray listened without interruption, his jaw tightening, his coffee cooling untouched in front of him. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled. "This isn't just a greedy son-in-law. This is premeditation. And if a doctor's involved," he shook his head, "that's conspiracy, serious time if we catch them." I slid the flash drive across the table. "I need more than sympathy, Ray. I need evidence. Evidence no court can ignore. And I need Sarah to see it with her own eyes. Otherwise, she'll never believe me." Ray's gaze softened for the first time. "Frank would be proud of you, Maggie. You're doing exactly what he would have told you to: stay calm, collect proof, fight smart." My throat tightened, but I held his eyes. "Then help me finish it before it's too late." He nodded once. "You have my word." When I returned home that afternoon, Brandon was already there, humming in the kitchen as though the day belonged to him. He glanced at me, suspicion flickering for just a moment. "Out for a little walk?" he asked lightly. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice airy, harmless. "The roses needed trimming. I thought the air might do me good." His smile returned, that too perfect smile that never touched his eyes. But something in his gaze lingered on me longer than usual. Perhaps he sensed the change in the air, the subtle shift in the ground beneath his feet. I forced a yawn, retreated to my room, and closed the door. That night I lay awake, listening to the house breathe, the creak of floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional whisper of Brandon's voice through the thin wall as he made his midnight calls. I thought of Sarah, asleep in the next room, her dreams carefully shaped by the lies whispered into her ear each night. I thought of the doctor, ready to sign away my freedom with a flourish of his pen. I thought of Brandon's arrogance, his belief that I was already defeated. But most of all, I thought of the microphone hidden in the porcelain vase. Its light blinked faithfully in the dark. A witness, a sentinel, my ally in silence. Each recorded word was a thread. And I was weaving them together now into a rope strong enough to pull myself out of the pit he had dug. I would not shout. I would not flail. I would prepare. Because when the time came, I would not just defend myself. I would bring his whole scheme crashing down. The days that followed felt like living inside a theater where I was the unwilling star of a play Brandon had written. Every gesture, every word I spoke, he twisted into a line that fit his script. And Sarah, poor Sarah, remained his most loyal audience. On Monday, he greeted her at the door with a grave expression. Your mom nearly started a fire. I walked in just in time to see the stove burning with nothing on it. Sarah's eyes darted toward me. Searching for confirmation, I shook my head. That's not true, I said firmly. I haven't cooked all day. Brandon sighed, stepping behind her, massaging her shoulders with calculated tenderness. She doesn't remember, sweetheart. That's what's so dangerous. Sarah's mouth opened as though to speak, but she closed it again, defeated by exhaustion. After 12 hours tending to patients, she had no strength left to question her husband. She believed because it was easier than doubting. I said nothing more. My words would not save me. Evidence would. That night, I listened again to the microphone in the porcelain vase. The small device had become my confessor, capturing the murmur of Brandon's late-night calls, the cadence of his plotting. His voice slipped through the static like a serpent in tall grass. She's declining fast, he whispered. Peterson, you were right. The meds are keeping her just off balance enough. The commitment hearing is set for Thursday. Sarah won't fight it. She's already convinced. The silence on the other end stretched, then the faint reply, be cautious. Paperwork has to look airtight. Judges hate mistakes in these cases. I've covered every angle, Brandon said with quiet pride. By the weekend, her accounts will be under my control. 6 months, maybe less, and the rest will take care of itself. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, bile rising in my throat. He spoke of me as though I were already gone, as though I were a stubborn weed to be cleared from the garden of his perfect life. The following morning, Sarah confronted me gently. Mom, maybe it's time we considered a facility, just so you'll be safe. Her voice trembled, her eyes filled with tears, but the conviction in her words came not from her heart, but from his. She was repeating his script line by line, a child reciting homework she hadn't written. Safe from what? I asked softly. She hesitated, looking down. From yourself, from accidents, from forgetting. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to force her to see the truth. But instead I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. Sarah, you must remember who I am. I raised you. I remember every scrape on your knee, every fever, every heartbreak. My mind is still my own. Please look at me and see me. Her lips quivered, but before she could answer, Brandon entered the kitchen. Sarah, don't upset her, he said smoothly. It only makes her more agitated. And just like that, the moment was gone. My daughter's eyes dimmed with doubt, her hand slipping from mine. Later that day, I met Ray again at the coffee shop. This time, he came armed with folders, his old detective's instincts sparking to life. I made some calls, he said, sliding the papers across to me. Peterson's license has been flagged before. Nothing that stuck, but whispers about him signing off on questionable evaluations. Always for cash. Always for families eager to move someone out of the way. I scanned the documents, my heart pounding. So he's done this before. Ray nodded grimly. And he'll do it again unless we stop him. How? I asked, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Ray leaned closer, lowering his voice. We catch Brandon in his own net. Recordings, messages, whatever we can. But most important, Sarah has to witness it. If she sees the truth with her own eyes, she'll break free from his hold. Without her, he has no case. I thought of my daughter, her tired face, her trembling voice. Yes, she had to see. Otherwise, the lies would always outweigh my words. Back at the house, Brandon's suspicion had grown. He watched me more closely now, his gaze lingering when I crossed a room, his questions probing. Where were you this afternoon? He asked casually over dinner. I visited the library, I replied, keeping my tone light. Needed a new book. His eyes narrowed. He didn't believe me, but he couldn't prove otherwise. Not yet. He leaned back, fork clinking against his plate. Sarah, we need to move quickly. Mom's episodes are getting worse. We can't delay. Sarah's fork froze midway to her mouth. So soon? She whispered. Sooner is safer, he said firmly. For all of us. I excused myself from the table before the rage boiling inside me broke the mask I wore, upstairs. I locked the door and paced the room. The storm was closing in. That night, I devised my own script. The recordings would not be enough on their own. I needed timing, strategy, precision. If Brandon was staging incidents, I would stage my defense. If he thought me helpless, I would use his arrogance against him. In my journal, I wrote 3 lines. 1. Keep collecting evidence. 2. Stay invisible until the moment comes. 3. Make sure Sarah is there when truth shatters the lie. I closed the book and placed it under my pillow. My heart slowed, my breathing evened. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange calm. Because I was no longer merely surviving, I was preparing for war. The next morning, Brandon hummed cheerfully as he dressed for work, the tune sharp and jarring in the quiet house. He kissed Sarah's cheek, then turned to me with that condescending smile. "Big day tomorrow, Margaret," he said softly. "Don't worry, you'll be well taken care of." He thought he was comforting me. He thought his victory was certain. But as he left the house, briefcase in hand, I touched the hidden flash drive in my pocket and whispered to myself, "So will you." The storm was no longer just his. It was mine, too. The house grew quieter with each passing day, but it was not the quiet of peace. It was the hush before a storm, the uneasy silence of predators circling in the dark. Brandon carried himself with the confidence of a man who believed the battle was already won. Sarah, exhausted from endless shifts, clung to his reassurances as though they were a life raft. And me, I moved through the rooms like a ghost, outwardly subdued, inwardly sharpening every tool I had left. On Tuesday night, I met Ray again, this time in the safety of his truck parked at the edge of the old cemetery. No one came there after dusk, and the shadows gave us cover. He spread folders across the dashboard, his voice low but fierce. "They've filed the petition," he said. "Emergency commitment. Hearing set for Thursday morning. If we wait until then, it'll be your word against his," with Peterson standing there in a white coat backing him up. My stomach twisted, but I kept my voice even. "Then we can't wait, we have to catch him now, before the judge hears a word." Ray tapped the folder. "I've pulled favors. 2 detectives are on standby, but they need more than suspicions. They need him caught in the act. A recording, a confession, something undeniable." I nodded slowly. "He's careless in the mornings. Shower running, phone on the counter. That's how I found the messages." Ray leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Then that's when we'll spring the trap. You get him talking. Stall him if you have to. We'll be ready." The next morning dawned gray and heavy. Brandon was humming again, some tuneless melody that grated against my nerves. He poured his coffee, glanced at me with mock tenderness. "How are we this morning, Margaret? Any more confusion?" I let my gaze drift, let my voice waver. "Some days I don't remember so well, but today seems clear enough." His smile widened, smug and poisonous. "Good, good. Clarity helps with paperwork. We'll have you settled soon." Sarah rushed through, barely hearing us, late for another shift. She kissed his cheek, squeezed my shoulder. "I'll be home late, Mom. Please try to rest." Her words were soft, but the look in her eyes was harder to bear than anything Brandon could invent. Pity, distance. She was already halfway convinced I was fading. When the door closed behind her, Brandon's demeanor shifted in an instant. The false warmth drained from his face, leaving behind cold calculation. He set his coffee down and slid a glossy brochure across the table. "Sunset Manor," he said briskly, "specializes in memory care. Secure wards, round-the-clock staff, a perfect place for someone in your condition." I picked it up with trembling fingers, playing my part. The smiling faces on the cover seemed grotesque, painted masks hiding the truth. "This looks expensive," I murmured. He chuckled softly. "Don't worry about finances. Your insurance will cover most of it, and Sarah and I will manage the rest." I let my shoulders sag, feigning defeat. "If you and Sarah think it's for the best," his eyes gleamed. "We really do, Margaret, we really do." That night I sat in my room with the door locked, journal open on my lap. The ink flowed steady across the page. Tomorrow, the snare tightens. He believes I am weak. He believes I will walk into his trap. He does not see that I have been weaving one of my own. I slid the flash drive of recordings into my pocket, the tiny weight grounding me. Every lie he had spoken, every whispered call, every slip of arrogance, it was all there, preserved in sound and time. Wednesday morning arrived with drizzle tapping against the windows, the sky heavy and low. Brandon was restless, pacing the kitchen with his phone pressed to his ear. Yes, he whispered. Tomorrow, the doctor will be there. She won't know what hit her. By Friday, I'll have control of everything. I stood in the hallway, unseen, the recorder in my pocket capturing every word. My heart pounded, but my face remained a mask of confusion when he finally turned and spotted me. Margaret, he said sharply. What are you doing up so early? Just thirsty, I murmured, holding up a glass of water. He studied me, suspicion flickering across his features, but then he smiled. Well, don't worry. By this time tomorrow, all of this will be behind us. I nodded, shuffling back toward my room. Behind us indeed, that afternoon Ray called. It's set. Tomorrow morning we'll be there before the hearing. Keep him calm, keep him talking, don't tip your hand. I won't, I said, my voice steady. Margaret, he added, his tone softer. You're braver than you know, just one more night, then we end this. The house felt suffocating that evening. Sarah came home late, worn thin, barely speaking. Brandon played the doting husband, cooking her dinner, rubbing her shoulders. All the while, he stole glances at me, as if savoring his victory before it arrived. I forced myself to eat slowly, to smile faintly, to play the role he expected. But inside, my mind was a battlefield, every thought a sharpened blade. When I excused myself to bed, I lay in the dark, listening to the rain, to the creak of the house, to the faint hum of Brandon's voice drifting from the kitchen as he made his final calls. The snare was ready. The pieces were in place. And tomorrow, the predator would walk into his own cage. The rain had stopped by dawn, but the sky remained heavy, bruised with gray. The house was still, almost reverent, as though it sensed the reckoning about to unfold within its walls. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old clock tick away the minutes. Each stroke was a reminder. By the time its hands circled back again, my life could be rewritten or redeemed. At 6 sharp, Brandon's alarm buzzed through the wall. His footsteps thudded down the hallway, steady and unhurried. He whistled as he went about his routine, the same smug tune that had grated on me for weeks. It was the sound of a man convinced of his triumph. I rose quietly, smoothed my hair, and buttoned my cardigan. My hand brushed against the flash drive in my pocket, its small weight both terrifying and comforting. Proof, my proof. The kitchen smelled of coffee when I entered. Brandon stood at the counter, scrolling his phone, silk tie draped neatly around his neck. He looked up, that smile pasted across his face like a mask. Morning, Margaret, he said cheerfully. Big day today, don't be nervous, everything will be handled. I lowered my gaze, letting my voice tremble. I don't like doctors, they always make me feel small. He chuckled, pouring himself a cup. This one will make everything easier. You'll see, no more confusion, no more stress, just peace. Peace, the word tasted like poison. At 7:30, Sarah hurried through the kitchen, still in her scrubs from the night before. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes. She kissed Brandon quickly, gave me a distracted pat on the shoulder. Mom, I'll try to meet you at the courthouse later. Please don't worry. Brandon will handle everything. Her words sliced me open, not for their cruelty, but for their unknowing faith in him. She truly believed she was helping me, sparing me. I wanted to grab her shoulders, shake her, cry out, "Open your eyes, Sarah. See me, see him." But I swallowed the urge. If I spoke too soon, everything would collapse. She had to see it for herself. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, Brandon's posture changed. He no longer bothered with the mask. He sat across from me at the table, sipping his coffee with clinical detachment. Margaret, he said, tone brisk, we need to discuss your living arrangements. He slid the Sunset Manor brochure across the table again, tapping the smiling faces on the cover. This will be your new home, structured activities, medical care, everything you need. I picked it up, let my hands shake as though with fear. When? He leaned in, eyes gleaming. Soon, tomorrow, if all goes well, you'll barely have time to pack a bag. I nodded slowly, pretending resignation. If you think it's best. Oh, I do, he said, patting my hand with feigned warmth. And Sarah will come around, she always does. At 8, the bathroom door clicked shut. The water began to run, filling the upstairs pipes with a steady roar. Brandon's shower, the most predictable part of his day. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, and sent the text, "It's time." Within minutes, tires crunched on the driveway. Car doors slammed. Voices murmured low and professional. The knock came, sharp against the front door. I opened it with a smile that carried no confusion at all. Ray stood there, flanked by two detectives in crisp uniforms. Behind them, an unmarked car idled ready. "Good morning, Maggie," Ray said softly. "You ready?" I nodded, more than ready. They stepped inside, moving with efficient silence. Detective Morrison checked her watch. "He'll be in there another 10 minutes at least. Perfect. Let's set up." Equipment was placed quickly, recorders, cameras, wires. The house, once my prison, was being transformed into a stage. But this time the script was mine. From upstairs, Brandon's voice called out cheerfully, muffled by the water. "Margaret, bring me a towel, would you? I forgot one." I glanced at Detective Morrison. She nodded. I walked to the linen closet, pulled out a towel, and paused at the bathroom door. My hand slid the bolt from the outside, a click barely audible but final. The handle rattled a moment later. "Margaret," doors stuck. "Oh my," I said sweetly, letting innocence drip from every syllable. "That old lock must be acting up again." The detectives took their positions. The stage was set. "Mr. Hayes," Detective Morrison called, her voice firm. "This is Detective Morrison with the Ohio State Police. We'd like to ask you some questions." Silence, then a laugh, sharp and mocking. "What the hell is this, Margaret? What have you done?" I stepped closer, dropping the mask at last. My voice was clear, unwavering. "I've been listening, Brandon. Every word, every plan. And so have they." His laugh faltered, turned into a snarl. "You're confused, Margaret. Delusional. You've been sick for weeks. No one will believe a word you say." Ray stepped forward, holding up a recorder. "They'll believe this, every phone call, every text, every whisper. We have it all." The bathroom went silent, except for the rush of water still pounding against tile. 15 minutes later, Sarah arrived. She burst through the door, her face pale, eyes wide with panic. "Mom," Ray called, "what's happening?" I took her trembling hands in mine. "Sweetheart, you need to see something." Detective Patterson handed her a tablet. On the screen glowed the messages from Brandon's phone. "Package delivered. She should be disoriented within 72 hours. Commitment papers filed. Judge sympathetic. Excellent work." Sarah scrolled, her breath catching with each line, her eyes filled with horror. "No, no, this can't be." From behind the bathroom door came Brandon's voice, desperate now. "Sarah, don't listen to them. Your mother's sick. This is her paranoia talking. She's turning you against me." Sarah's tears spilled over. She turned the screen toward the door, her voice breaking. "Then what is this, Brandon? What is this?" Silence, then a thump as though he had struck the wall. "Sarah, please," he pleaded. "I was doing this for us, for our future. She's a burden. She'll ruin everything we've built." The last thread snapped inside her. Her face hardened, jaw set. "No, Brandon, she's my mother, and you're a monster." The detectives moved in then, their voices calm but firm. "Mr. Hayes, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and elder abuse. Step away from the door." The handle rattled violently, but the lock held. I reached for Sarah's hand, squeezing it tight. She squeezed back, tears streaming, but there was strength in her grip now. For the first time in weeks, I felt my daughter truly see me, not as a confused old woman, not as a burden, but as her mother, clear-eyed, standing, fighting. The snare had closed. And this time it was not me caught inside. The house felt different once Brandon was gone. For weeks, it had been heavy with suspicion, every hallway thick with the weight of lies. Now, with the patrol car's taillights fading down the street, the silence was softer, like a home exhaling at last. Sarah and I sat together at the kitchen table, where so much of this battle had been fought in words and glances. She was trembling, her scrub sleeves still damp with rain, her eyes red from crying. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked, the refrigerator hummed. Life, persistent as ever, carried on. Finally, she whispered, "Mom, how could I not see? How could I believe him over you?" I reached across, wrapping her hand in mine. "Because you loved him and because you're human." He was skilled at weaving lies that felt like truths. But when the moment came, when you saw the real evidence, you chose me. That's what matters. Her tears fell freely then, and I let her cry. Tears were cleansing. They washed away the poison he had poured into her heart. Ray joined us later, setting down 3 cups of fresh coffee. "It's over, Maggie. The judge will see the evidence. Peterson will crack once charges are filed." Brandon's arrogance built his own cage. I nodded, though my gaze remained on my daughter. The law would handle them. My concern was here with her with us. Weeks passed. Brandon's trial came swiftly, the evidence overwhelming. 30 years to life, Peterson, stripped of his license, accepted a plea deal. The newspapers carried the story. Son-in-law accused of conspiring to commit elder fraud, caught by mother-in-law's recordings. I never sought fame, but if my ordeal warned even one other family to look more closely, to ask harder questions, then perhaps some good could grow from it. Sarah filed for divorce the day after Brandon's arrest. She began therapy, facing the grief of betrayal and the long climb back to trusting herself. I watched her grow stronger, steadier, with every passing week. We shared dinners, long walks, small laughter. Little by little, the wounds closed, though scars remained. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon, Sarah sat beside me on the porch. Children played in the distance, their laughter echoing down the quiet street. "Mom," she said softly, "thank you for fighting. I almost lost you." I smiled, brushing her hair from her face like I had when she was a girl. "Sweetheart, I've been fighting for you since the day you were born. This was just another battle." She laughed through her tears, and for the first time in many months, peace settled over me. I learned something in those dark weeks, that age is not weakness. That love can be twisted, yes, but it can also be the anchor that pulls us back to truth. And that sometimes, even in the face of betrayal, the quiet persistence of one voice can change the ending of the story. My son-in-law underestimated me. He saw only years, gray hair, the tremor of my hands. He forgot the strength that comes from a lifetime of endurance, the instincts sharpened by love, the wisdom carved by loss. He thought he was the hunter, but he walked straight into his prey's trap, and I am still here. To those listening, thank you for sharing this journey with me. If you've stayed until the end, know this: your voice matters, your story matters. Guard it well. May your homes be filled with truth, your hearts with courage, and your families with love that cannot be shaken by lies. Until next time, I wish you health, peace, and happiness for you and your loved ones.